The Aggies have a ton of position battles heading into the 2024 season, but none more important than which linebacker stands next to Taurean York.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So before we get into today's discussion, I did want to add Bryce Foster has entered the transfer portal. We're not going to break that down a ton because we broke down, hey, if he hits the portal, what's going to happen on yesterday's show. You know, we got the backups there, Shanahan, Mark Naboo, and then the kid that came in from Utah. So if you want to hear that discussion, that was yesterday's episode of Locked On Aggies. But today we're going to talk about what are the most significant position battles this year for Texas A&M. And in all honesty, I've got a handful listed here as important position battles and then a handful listed here as, I don't think these battles are all that important to this team. And so the first battle that I think is the most neck and neck right now is linebacker 2. We know Taurean York's going to be out there. The question is, who's the other linebacker? And hear me out on this. I think the names are Sanford, DeShields, the transfer, and then Scooby Williams. DeShields recently transferred in from Pitt. You know, Sanford has been here for a little while. And then, of course, once again, Scooby Williams is the Florida transfer. And once again, linebacker 2 is that position battle, in my opinion, because we're going to run through all of these position battles that I think are important. And I don't think any of these are as close and as interesting as linebacker. If I had to give an edge right now to a linebacker, I would say Scooby Williams. Now, hear me out. Hear me out on this. So you talk about learning a system and how important that is. Well, Texas A&M's DC, Coach Bateman, was with Scooby Williams at Florida. So while Sanford has been here, he hasn't, he's been at Texas A&M. This system is new to him. Same for DeShields. So I think that gives Scooby Williams a leg up. And I'm just telling you, he did a lot well in the spring game. He did a lot well in spring practice. I think there is a lot of hype around Scooby Williams. He's a good football player. And, he was, and we discussed this time, he was fine at Florida. He wasn't great. He wasn't awful. Here's the deal. We'll talk about it. Like, I'll call a spade a spade. The secondary last year was awful. We can all agree there. And Scooby Williams, watching the film on him, watching the good and the ugly, he did a lot well and he did a lot wrong. So, it was, can he be coached up a little bit? Maybe. Once again, I'm telling you, sometimes a change of scenery can do wonders. And that's what's going on right now for Scooby Williams. Listen, Sanford made a few plays in that spring game as well. He had one hit where it was just kaboom. And once again, do not forget about Sanford and this new kid, DeShields. I am telling you, this kid can play. The Pitt transfer who committed, I guess that was 2 days ago's show. Yeah, 2 days ago show. So the point here is this linebacker 2 battle is going to be interesting. Those are the 3 names that I am paying attention to. I lean Scooby Williams right now, but I do think that those other 2 guys are gonna make a run. I don't think any of the freshmen. I could see some comments saying, "What about the freshmen?" I love the freshman linebackers on this roster. I just don't know if I'm buying it right now. And listen, I said the same thing about York last year. I wasn't buying it last year, and look what happened. So that doesn't mean it's impossible. I just don't think you're going to see one of these freshmen end up being the dude at linebacker. So the next important battle I have here, a position battle, is wide receiver. And I don't think so. Like, I'll tell you this: offensive line. Of course, I have offensive line listed, but I don't have it as high up. And I'll tell you why. I don't have it as high up because I think that there are still players that are going to be added to this room. Same with receiver. But I just have this feeling the offensive line is going to drastically change after what happened. Losing Foster, losing Hinton. I just think you're losing offensive linemen, and I think that you're going to see that position group change a little bit. So receiver is my number 2 position battle because I think they're going to go get one more guy. Of course, the kid went to Auburn. The Penn State kid committed to Auburn. It had come down to Texas A&M and Auburn. He chooses Auburn, and then Auburn tries to take a shot at Texas A&M by posting the dude stiff arming the Auburn receiver stiff arming the Texas A&M player. I forget who that player was in that video. I have to look back at it. But and like, oh, we dunked on Texas A&M, and it's like it's funny, and it's all in good fun. I'm not knocking having fun. I'm just saying, listen, like we could go back and forth on this, but the wide receiver position, I feel pretty good about what you got. I love Moose. I love Noah Thomas. I'm really high on Noah Thomas. We'll have that conversation here in a little bit. And then, of course, Ja'Day Walker, I'm still feeling good there. Micah Tease, still got Cyrus Allen, some of these young freshmen. And then, of course, the injury to Jabri Barber hurts. And that's why I think you're going to see him go get somebody. I thought Texas A&M was going to land this Penn State kid. I really did. That when I saw that he had committed to Auburn, it sounds like Auburn dropped a bag on this kid, money wise, and I'm not saying he wasn't worth it. He was worth it, but I'd almost rather get 2 good wide receivers or over 1 great wide receiver because I think you're going to be battling. I mean, is that kid better than Noah Thomas, Ja'Day Walker, and Moose? I think he's even with those. You know what I mean? It's not like you're getting. That's my point. So, and I know I sound like grumpy guy whose team misses player. I get that. I know if an Auburn fan's listening, you'll hear that. But and good for Auburn. He's a good player, and I know they need receivers. I think a little bit more than Texas A&M does because they've got besides Cam Coleman, who's going to be really good, former Texas A&M commit. But so that receiver room is going to be interesting, and I think you're going to see the coaching staff go get one more guy to compete there. But I do feel pretty good that you know who your guys are. I think the 2 deep is going to be interesting unless somebody just comes on not out of nowhere, but if somebody comes out and really, really surprises us in the summer and makes a move potentially into a starting role. So the next position I have here is the secondary. And this is fun because like the whole secondary, we could sit here like I'm not going to sit here and name drop, but because and the reason I'm not going to do that is because I think every single position. I mean, I think Bryce Anderson is locked in, and then it's like, is every other position up for grabs? And 90% of these guys are going to be transfers. You've got the guys that were freshmen last year that did some stuff well, some stuff bad, and now they are sophomores. Do you see them work in? And then you had, I believe it was 8, right? I believe it was 8 transfers in the secondary. So I think we've got some secondary injuries. I know that Des Ricks is banged up. I haven't seen any kind of update on that. I know he was banged up, but I haven't seen any kind of comment updating that. But if anybody's heard anything about that, let me know. But so, I mean, you brought in a ton of transfers in the secondary, and I think all of them are valuable. I really do. So I think the secondary is going to be just fine. And I think that you've got a lot of guys. This battle is going to be interesting. Now, what does the coaching staff go get anybody else to play in that room? I'm not really sure about that, but I do think I'm not really sure if you do or not. But I think if they did go and get somebody, I wouldn't be upset about it, once again, as we've kind of discussed. So we've got a few more position groups to talk about when it comes to position battles. positions we feel good about. Then we're going to talk about the schedule a little bit. I saw a rankings list from Athlon talking about the most important SEC games of the week, and we saw Texas A&M games listed a ton there. So we're going to talk about that. We'll do all that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at Monopoly Go. We've all been there either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in this game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with the wrecking ball, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Also want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, you shouldn't be buying tickets to anything anywhere else. Game Time is your one-stop shop for tickets, whether it's a ball game, hockey game, baseball game, football game, basketball game, cricket, whatever you're looking for. Game Time has got you covered. Concert, theater, comedy, whatever you need a ticket to, Game Time is going to give it to you at the best possible price. I love Game Time. I also love that you can use the Game Time app to see what your seat's going to look like. Once again, going to a concert this weekend with my dad, one of his buddies, and a couple of his buddies, and we got our tickets on Game Time. And it was super simple. We saw exactly where our seats are going to be. I got tickets to a baseball game that are on Game Time. You're not going to find me buying tickets anywhere other than Game Time because it is the only place you should ever be buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So getting deeper into these, what are the most significant position battles for Texas A&M this year? And I think that offensive and defensive line, once again, I've kind of discussed this a little bit, or not defensive line, excuse me, offensive line. I think that offensive line, there's a lot of, obviously we forget about Trey June, but with Bryce Foster gone, it's like, I feel pretty good that Basantis will be in there, but the rest of these guys, we know the Kansas transfer has been playing really well. We've heard some things about different transfers, but what is going to happen with this room? Who's going to jump in and play a lot of snaps? You have a ton of veteran guys that have played all over the offensive line. I still think the coaching staff goes and gets another offensive lineman or two in the portal. So I don't think this unit's complete. Once again, I feel pretty good about Basantis, feel pretty good about either Trey Zune, and then there are a ton of names. And even Basantis, you could argue that Trey Zune is the only locked in offensive line starter right now. There's a ton of moving parts on the offensive line. We're going to have an entire offensive line episode coming up here in a few weeks. Pretty excited about that because you all know I love offensive line play. And this unit's going to be key for this team. So the offensive line is going to be very interesting. And then I feel pretty good when it comes to position battles about tight end. I think Donovan Green wins that. I'm assuming he's good to go, which we saw him, in a penny at practice a few weeks ago before the spring game. So you feel good he's going to be good to go. Running back, I feel pretty good there. Some might not. I know that Texas A&M might pursue some running backs in the portal. I don't really. I feel better, I guess, about EJ Smith than others do. But and then quarterback, once again, y'all know my opinions on the quarterback room. We discussed that a little bit on yesterday's show as well. In the defensive line, I feel pretty good there about who's going to be in the 1 and 2 deep. So I don't think those battles are as interesting, but these battles that we discussed earlier in the episode are going to really make or break this season for Texas A&M. So I'm really anxious to see how that all plays out. Let me know in the YouTube comments, what position battles are y'all most excited about? Are there any that I talked about that maybe you think someone else is going to win? Is Scooby Williams not going to win? Is it going to be Sanford, or is it going to be the Shields? Let me know y'all's thoughts in the YouTube comments about if y'all think anybody else is going to win a battle that I kind of discussed. So now I want to talk a little bit about an article from Athlon, and it gave you the most exciting, important SEC game for each week of the season. And Texas A&M had 4 games listed, which was pretty, that's a lot. So listed here, week 1, Texas A&M Notre Dame in Kyle Field. That ball game is going to be so darn fun to watch. I absolutely cannot wait for that football game. I mean, first of all, Kyle Field is going to be a literal madhouse for that football game. I cannot wait to see that. I cannot wait to see how that plays out. I just think, listen, I still have a feeling that Notre Dame, this is probably going to be a pick'em. If I had to guess, this game betting wise is going to be a pick'em. And I find it really hard to believe. Do you know the hype that's been around this game? The Mike Elko era is here. Notre Dame's coming to town. I think you're going to see this game be an absolute dogfight. I just struggle to see the Fighting Irish coming into Kyle Field and winning this football game. And listen, it's not to say that they can't. It's not to say that this isn't going to be a really, really tough game for the Aggies to win. But I'm just telling you, it's going to be tough for Notre Dame to come win this football game. So that's the first game Texas A&M was listed for. That's going to be a fun one. It's going to be tough for the Fighting Irish to come in and win that football game. The next was week 3 when the Aggies head to Gainesville to take on the Gators. Another football game that is going to be really, really interesting. And once again, that's going to be a game that has huge repercussions for the entire season for the Aggies. I think that that's a game that if you want to win 8, 9, 10 games, you can't lose that game in Gainesville. And while I don't think Florida is going to be all that great, I do think that playing in Gainesville is not fun. It is a tough place to play. Once again, you never want to. There's some venues in the SEC that are not fun to go play in. I think it's tough to play in Gainesville. I think it's obviously tough to play in Kyle Field. It's tough to play in Auburn. I think it's tough to play in Athens. Now, that's partially because Georgia's just really good, but you get what I'm saying. There are some elite atmospheres in college football, especially in the SEC, and you just don't ever feel good about going to win a game when you're playing there, regardless of how good or bad that football team is. So, and once again, Florida's going to be pumped up for that game. I've discussed on this show how difficult their schedule is. They have to win that game. That is like Texas A&M, I think, is going to be a really good football team, and that's probably one of their most winnable games on the season besides whoever they have one not good non-conference team. And besides that, Texas A&M is probably one of the next closest, more winnable games, and Texas A&M's a pretty good football team. So that says a lot. Then the next game that the Aggies were listed was week 6 when Missouri comes to Kyle Field. Another game. Listen, I talked about a few weeks ago, is Missouri a one-hit wonder? Are they legit, or were they a one-hit wonder? They were really good last year. And the more I see the recruiting going on over there, the more I feel confident that Missouri might be here to stick around. And I'll tell you this, that's going to be another tough football game for the Aggies to win. It's not going to be easy to beat the Missouri Tigers, even in Kyle Field. It's tough to say what I think the most winnable of those. We talk about the 4 tough home games all the time: LSU, Texas, Missouri, and Notre Dame. What is the most winnable of those 4 games? You got to say it's either LSU or Missouri, but they are all really, really tough football games. So the next game is, of course, no surprise here, week 14, when the Longhorns come to Kyle Field. in what's going to be one of the most anticipated and exciting football games in a very, very, very long time. One of the best rivalries in college football is going to get renewed. I think the entire world is excited about this game. And once again, I know that on paper, is Texas the better football team right now? Yes, you probably have to say that. But I'll also tell you this. It is not going to be easy for those Longhorns to come into Kyle Field and win this football game. So that's going to be really, really fun. But my point is, and the real takeaway from all this is there's going to be a lot of eyes on Texas A&M this year. They're going to be playing in a lot of good football games, which gives you chances to overachieve and chances to underachieve. You really want to see Coach Elko overachieve in his first year. The other two games I have that you could have had listed here, they weren't, were the game at Auburn and then LSU at home. There were two really good games those weeks. I forget which games they were, to write that down, but two really good games those weeks that, were probably better than these games. But there's going to be a lot of eyes on the Aggies because they are playing a lot of important and good football games that are going to have a lot of people interested. I'm going to give you a list of a few players that I think could be all SEC players for the Aggies this year. And I'll tell you, I think that this list is bigger than many would anticipate heading into the season. But when you hear me say it out loud, I think you're going to go, that's fair. So we'll talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our wonderful friends over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. I'm telling you, if you're betting on sports, you better be doing it on FanDuel. It is the best of all of these apps to use. It's what I use. It's what I'm always going to use. I highly, highly, highly recommend you go check out FanDuel. It just enhances the game. It makes it more fun, whatever sport it is. Betting on it on FanDuel. It's easy to use. It's fun to use. I highly recommend it. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's run through some names of some players who could be first, or not first team, just all SEC players. So there's one name on here that I don't even think, I don't even need to read it. Y'all know who I'm talking about, and that is Nick Scorton, the man who needs no introduction, a guy who I think will be a top 10 player in the SEC this season. I think he'll be a top 3 defensive player in the SEC. Heck, I think he could be a top 10 player in college football. This dude is that dude. Simple to say. So no debate there. The next name I've got, and this is I've got a few that are, let me run through the ones that I think are more straight, more we can all agree on. And then I'll get to some bold ones. So Taurean York, once again, I think we all feel pretty good that you're going to see Taurean York's name on some sort of all SEC list. And then Shamar Turner, same thing. I think we all feel pretty good you're going to see him on some sort of all SEC list. So those are the three, I think, surefire names. Then I've got some ones where I think it gets a little bit bolder. Bryce Anderson. I don't know how bold that is. I think he's back at his natural spot. I think he's going to have a good season. I really do feel good about that. Then I've got Ruben Owens. I think Bryce Anderson. So there's those first three names I listed, space, Bryce Anderson, space, the rest of these names. And the first is Connor Wigman. And that's because Ruben Owens and Connor Wigman, both of them, I think. But Connor Wigman, it's tough to be a quarterback because, there's only, there's one quarterback. It's tough. There's not as many, the first team offensive line, there's a handful of linemen. It's, there's a quarterback. So you got to be a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the SEC to be there. And I think if Connor Wigman hits his upside, he can do that. It's a bold take, but I do think it's possible. Ruben Owens, I think he just looked really dynamic in the spring game. He looked really dynamic in spring practice. He looked good catching the football, running the football. I think he's going to break onto the scene, take over as the legit dude in this backfield, and have an incredible season. I've then got 2 pass catchers, Noah Thomas and Donovan Green. Y'all know my thoughts on Donovan Green. I would have made this prediction about Donovan Green last year. Of course, he goes down with the ACL tear. He's banged up. And then Noah Thomas, just, Coach Elko said if he can just get a little bit stronger, he can be a legit wide receiver 1 in college football in the SEC and a real incredible football player. So I think Coach Moffitt is going to get him right. I think he's going to work his behind off over these next few months, and he's going to be a guy in this conference. And then my last one, my bold one, I think some folks might be a little upset about it. It's Trey Zune. I think he's going to have a good year, ladies and gentlemen. I really think Trey Zune is going to have a good season. And I think that, for the Aggies to have a good season, he's got to have a good season. So that's my last bold player. Let me know in the YouTube comments, are there any players I didn't list that you could see being all SEC type of players this year? And remember, and tell me if you agree with this statement. Like when I said there's going to be a ton of guys on this list, I bet at first you're like, oh, okay. And then I read those names and you're like, I wouldn't be crazy surprised to see all those guys listed. Let me know if you agree with that statement in the YouTube comments. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. I really do appreciate it. I hope everybody has an outstanding rest of their Thursday, and we will see you tomorrow.